is awesome. But I'll tell you what, man, we put that in the divine liturgy somehow. We get all kinds of things happening.
But no, thank you.
All right. Well, I think, Your Eminence, you ceded your prayer time to Father James, right? Is that what that was? All right. All right. Some good old Southern revival music waking us up and stuff. That's a beautiful thing. Well, I'm going to end, not yet, but I'm going to end by showing you the incredible turf that you covered in one basically short day, which I think will amaze you when you get done with it. But we have one more piece of business to take care of, and that is a little bit more explanation about, kind of some of the what this looks like when you're all done with it, and then asking you. So I'm giving you a heads up that this is going to be coming to tell us which one of the two task forces you want to work on. Do you want to work on the clergy development one, or do you want to work on the laity engagement, stewardship, and education task force? And all we're going to ask you to do is come together, and we'll coordinate it with you between Philip and I, who's done such an amazing job putting this all together. One Zoom, at most two Zooms, to create what it is I'm getting ready to show you is the output of the work product. So we're going to want to divide it up relatively evenly, which is to say that we can't have all the clergy on the clergy development one. In fact, we need to make sure we have some laity on there. And so we want to mix it up a little bit. So we'll go through and we'll let everybody give us their first choices. And if it matches up relatively evenly, great. If not, we're going to ask for volunteers to move around. So I'm warning you that that's going to be at the end of this next segment over here, okay? So that we're all clear on that. So let's kind of, before we kind of get to that point and before we get to the review part, let me show you an example of what completed work product can look like in the context of a Orthodox Church 4 Disciplines of Execution action plan. And this is one, again, I'm choosing a real example. This is verbatim right off of the work product that was just recently completed by your brothers and sisters up in the Diocese of New England. And I just chose one they ended up with 3, but I chose one of the specific WIG goals to walk you through what the final product looks like. So in their case, they wanted to focus on a leadership development program because that was something that they thought was sorely lacking. And again, it's all based on the foundation of the same kind of process you all went through. They went through a little bit longer period with more retreats, but they got to that point. So I told you that the WIG wording, and I'm showing you all of this. Again, this is all in the presentation that you'll be able to look at on the website. It's up there now, but it'll be refined with your final work product. Is the wording is from X to Y by when? From X to Y by when? So when they were talking about a leadership development problem or program that they wanted to develop, the problem that they had there is there did not exist one right now. So unlike many other goals that you set where you have metrics and you go, well, the X is where our starting point is on metrics and our Y is the reasonable endpoint that we want to get to in that same metric, and then we figure out how long it's going to take us. The problem that they had, and I'm foreshadowing because it's going to be the problem that you're going to have, is there are no starting metrics for the things you're getting ready to do. So we adapt the 40X process, and so their X is to research and develop an effective leadership training program and train parish trainers. Okay, so that's kind of the first step of the starting point that they want to achieve, is to actually research and develop an effective leadership training program and ensure they train the trainers. The why then is to actually deliver that training program to at least 21 of the diocese parishes, which in their case represents about 75% of their total parishes. And their when is within 24 months from the start. Now, when you ask the question, well, how they come up with 24 months, I'll show you in a second. You will fill in that blank after you go through the process that I'm going to show you that they went through, okay? So again, just to refresh, this is what their wildly important goal looks like: to develop and implement an effective leadership training program in at least 21 of the diocese parishes within 24 months. So the first thing they did, as we talked about, the next step after you develop your wildly important goal is, what are our lag measures? and what are our lead measures? What are the things we look at the end, and then what leads to them? So they identified 5 very specific lag measures that they could look at. One of them is, have they completed the research and the research of the most effective training program? Okay, forget the time period for a second. We're going to come back to how they got there. So their first lag measure is, did we finish the development, the research of this training program? Their second lag measure was, did we develop the most effective leadership training program for our diocese? Which is to say, first we're going to research what other ones look like, but then we're going to adapt it to the unique circumstances of our diocese, and that's our second lag measure. Again, in the rearview mirror, we can look at it and say, check the box, we've developed it. The third lag measure they developed then was recruiting and training some parish trainers, because what they realized was, in order to reach that penetration of 21 parishes, they were going to need to have a small team of people who were trained on how to deliver that leadership training program. So that was their third lag measure. Their fourth lag measure was to then recruit and deliver the training program to at least 21 of the parishes. Now, obviously, if 21 was the bare minimum, certainly if they could get all the parishes, they would have been happy to do so. But remember, the law of diffusion of innovation says you're not going to reach everybody all at once, and there'll be some people that you never reach because they just don't want it. So what they set out to do is to say, in the fourth lag measure is, now we're going to recruit the parishes that are going to be trained, and we're going to deliver this training program that our trainers are trained to do. And then the fifth lag measure that they finalized was, once we do this, let's assess the results against the metrics that we decided determined what was an effective program. So if you look at it and step back up to like 50,000 feet, there's a research phase, there's a development phase, there's a training the trainers phase, there's a training and implementing at the parish phase, and there's an assessment phase. And all 4 of those phases were lag measures. At the end of it, you can say we did it or we didn't do it. And they developed a timeline for it, but that came at the end, and then we just backfilled it into this slide, okay? So now you got to ask yourself, well, if those are the lag measures, what are the lead measures for each and every one of these lag measures? Well, here is their listing of the lead measures that achieved each of the lag measures. And I won't go through these in great detail, but suffice it to say, if you do all of these steps, you will predict the outcome of achieving that lag measure. And all of these steps were in their control. So it met the criterion of being a good lead measure, that it was basically influenceable, and it was predictive that they would actually achieve the lag measure if they did that. And this was a process that I led them through to identify the lags, to identify the leads, and then lay it all out. Now, we can go through these in greater detail if you want to, or you can go through them on your own time. But this is the next process that we're going to go through once you get into your small groups, and we can do it small group by small group, okay? So the next question then that we remember from the 4 disciplines of execution is creating a compelling scoreboard. Because what we want to be able to do is track how are we doing vis-a-vis every one of these lead measures that we're trying to accomplish and every one of the lag measures that we're trying to accomplish. And they took to heart the notion that you cannot master what you do not measure. And so they went about developing a compelling scoreboard. And if you look again back at the theory behind the compelling scoreboard, we understand that people play differently once they keep score. And people play best when they're engaged in keeping score, and high level of engagement, it occurs when there's a scoreboard that really is designed by the players. And again, for each of these, what we're focusing on is, what is our WIG, our wildly important goal, what are our lag measures, what are our lead measures, okay? And so I'm going to step forward, but I'm going to ask you these 4 questions, because this is the test of a good scoreboard. Is it simple? Can the team see it and easily drive accountability? Does it show lead and lag measures, and can everyone tell at a glance if they're winning? If you think about a scoreboard, for example, in a football game, the scoreboard in the football game is real simple. There's just a few data fields in there. You know the score from each team, you know the amount of time left, and you know what quarter you're in. Yeah, maybe they'll throw in a few extra things like how many timeouts that you have, but whether you know how many timeouts are having or not does not indicate who's winning or who's going to win. If you just know the score and the time and the quarter, you know about everything you need to know to keep track of who's winning and who's going to win, right? Now, the coaches keep track of a lot more information. How many passes, how many runs, how many forward passes more than 1 yard, 5 yards, 10 yards, quarter, how many interceptions, how many yards per, all those kinds of things are the things that managers like to keep track of. But from the player's perspective, at the end of the day, what matters is what's up on the big scoreboard. Back to the example that I used before, if you look at the compelling scoreboard that was developed by the Opryland Hotel, it was fairly simple. They identified each week of the year and they recorded what was the check-in time and what was the percentage difference from the prior week, what was the room cleanup time, what was the percentage difference, what was the room availability time, what was the bag delivery time, right? And again, they kept track of the lag measures. So all they had to do was look at the scoreboard and they could tell, how are we doing? Have we been improving our check-in time, our room cleanup time, our room availability time, our bag delivery time, and what percentage is our improvement going? And you color code this to make it even easier, because obviously if it's, as we did in the data that I shared with you at the beginning, if it's going in the right direction, you put it in green. If it's going in the wrong direction, you put it in red. Now think of how easy it is from a management perspective. So the next time you have a diocese council meeting, His Eminence pulls out this scoreboard, and hopefully it's even up on your website, and everybody looks at it and says, how are we doing vis-a-vis our respective goals based on how we're set out to do, all right? But yours are going to be a little bit different than this, because that just happened to be based on the measures that they were looking at. And to show you that this works beyond just a commercial example, this is an actual compelling scoreboard from an actual church that implemented the 4 disciplines of execution. Now, what you'll see in here is they had 4 wildly important goals in the areas of evangelism, worship, community, and service. These were the sub-goals, the lead and lag measures that allowed them to measure what they were doing vis-a-vis achieving each of these goals. And then you can see that they looked at it by week, what was the total of what they achieved in each and every one of these categories. So, you know, for example, in the category of evangelism, they had a program that they called One Story, One Verse, One Purse Commitment. It meant something to that parish. And they had baptisms. And they were tracking, how are we doing vis-a-vis our goals in each of these areas week by week by week by week. Now, the rows represent different campuses. This was one of those big box churches, so they had different campuses, and that's why they had different roles. If this was just one parish, there would be one row for each of those criterion. And then you can see the same thing that they had for worship. In their case, the sub-goals that they were looking at, the lags that they were looking at, were invitation cards and worship attendance. In service, they looked at new people mobilized and missions participated. And in community, they looked at new community groups formed, and then they had a life group attendance program. Now, these don't mean anything to you, but they mean an enormous amount to them, because they tied directly back to their lag measures and their lead measures. So let me take you back to the one leadership goal that we went through, that the Diocese of New England came up with. And after they identified what their WIG was from X to Y by when, what their lag measures were, the 5 of them, what the 15 lead measures were, each of which predicted the likelihood of outcome, this was the scoreboard they came up with. Very simple. If you go back and look at this, this will map to the 11 steps that I'm going to show you in just a second. And for each one of the steps, the only thing they had to keep track of, the deadline date. Now, for now, you see it says start date with a blank, and then 1 month blank, 2 month blank, blah, blah, blah. Those are going to be filled in with exact dates once they know what the start date is. So that middle column is just going to have a date. They know the start date. Once they set it, that'll be a set date. For the row underneath that, they're just going to add 1 month to that date, and then 1 month later, and then 2 months later, right? Then the third column is where the score is being kept. That's the only one that's going to be a variable. For every week, they're going to say, what week are we in? What's the date we're measuring? And what is our percentage completion on the specific goal that we have identified, right? So if you look at, let's take step number 2, developing a process plan. They said it's going to take us 1 month. So now that will all be precise with the date attached to it. So let's just say that says January 31st, 2021. So at the end of the first week of January, on January 7th, when they do their accountability session, they're going to say, how far are we at achieving the development of our process plan? And let's assume they're at 0% completion 1 week in. Okay, fine. Next week, January 14th, they get together on their huddle and they say, where are we? And they look at it and they say, we're about 10% complete. Okay, ruh-roh, you can start to see a problem now. You don't have to wait too long, because if you've got 30 days to get to 100% completion on that step, and 14 days into it, you're only at 10% complete, you're going to have to make up some time in order to stay on track. So you can see how this scoreboard will tell anybody looking at it with very great ease how are they doing with respect to each of the respective lead and lag measures that they had identified to allow them to achieve it, okay? And then they needed a second one, a second scoreboard for when they got into the training phase. Because what they decided was that the trainers would develop a implementation date for the training and a completion date for the training. And by keeping this simple form, they could fill out for each of the parishes that they were going to train, and they would know who was assigned to train it, when it was supposed to happen, and when it was completed. So you can see with relative ease exactly where you are in the process. And this is what keeps the level of accountability going, so that it's not like, you mentioned earlier, oh, we have all these great things about, let's do something for the youth, and then a year goes by and you haven't done anything. Or let's have a new clergy program, and the year goes by and you haven't done anything. So what's going to happen then is this comes about after you complete a stage of really developing, a comprehensive, detailed step-by-step action plan. And I want to say I copied it, but let me see where I put it. Okay. So let me just give you an example of what that action plan looks like. Now, again, this is back on their leadership plan. So their goal, their wildly important goal, was to design and implement an effective leadership training program in at least 21 of the parishes within 24 months, okay? So what you see here on this chart that they filled out, the task force filled out, is for every step, the first column tells you what the action is. The second column tells you who's responsible for completing it. The third column tells you what is the deadline, and the fourth column tells you how will we know when that step is completed, so that you have perfect accountability and perfect management and perfect identity of what it is that you're supposed to do. So they started in the red, you see lag measure number 1. Here's what it was. They identified the sub-steps, which came right out of their lead measures. This is verbatim from that previous chart where they had lead measures in there. And then they identified for this step 2, we think it's going to take us 1 month. So they put in 1 month from a start date. Now, once we know what the start date is, and that's to be set separately, we can just calculate 30 days later and put that date in there. But they said it's going to take them a month to develop that, and then we have the column that tells us how do we know when it's complete. Their next step was to identify 5 parish leadership training programs to evaluate and consider from both inside and outside the Orthodox ecosystem, because they really wanted best practices in church leadership development. They thought that would take them 1 month after the first step, or after step 2, to identify those 5 training programs. And on you go. So what you see is this builds so that every step we know how long it's going to take, who's going to do it, and how will we know when that step's complete. Once they finished the first lag measure, they went to the second lag measure, third lag measure, fourth lag measure, and fifth lag measure. And every one of these has the same level of accountability, a precise definition of what's to be done, who's to do it, what the deadline is, and how we know it's complete. When they got done developing this plan, and this is what you all are going to do in your small groups, by the way, for each of your 2 wildly important goals, they went back and counted the third column. And they said, if we aggregated all of that, how long would that be from the start date? So we can look at it together and say the start date is going to be whatever they set. So the first one is 1 month, plus 1 is 2, plus 2 is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7, plus 1 is 8, plus 4 is 12, plus 10 is 22, plus 1 is 23, plus 4 is 24. So then they could go back and fill in what the deadline was, 24 months. If they had changed any of those dates, and there was a lot of discussion about how long they think each of these steps would take, it just drives the deadline. So if they decided that they could do it in 23 months, then it would be X to Y by 23 months. If they decided it was going to be 26 months, X to Y by 26 months. In this case, it just so happened that after a lot of debate and discussion of how long they thought each step would take, it ended up being 24 months. So you can see now, once you have these 11 steps that are the lead measures that need to be taken to achieve the lag measures, because that's what we're going to manage towards. Remember, we're managing towards the lead measures now. We're not managing towards the lag measures again. It's very easy now to go back and build the scoreboard, because there's your 11 steps, right? So the scoreboard comes into play once we have developed the action plan that we're going to implement, because now we know what we're accomplishing and how we're going to keep track and how we're going to keep score. And this is the kind of thing that is a powerful tool that His Eminence could use, and the other leaders that are going to be leading the implementation of this plan, because it won't be His Eminence leading the implementation plan. Think of him as like the team owner, right? And there'll be a couple of head coaches that are going to be managing this process down the way. But they can, at an instant, look and see exactly where they are and how they're doing and whether they're behind schedule or ahead of schedule. And frankly, so can all of you as members of the Diocesan Council. And hopefully everybody involved in the process can keep track of it. Now, I always recommend that the scoreboard go up on the website of whatever entity it is, whether it's a parish or a diocese or national church, because that's part of accountability. What we've said to our faithful is within 24 months, we're going to be training 21 parishes in a best practices leadership program that we've developed for our diocese. Well, let's show everybody with full transparency, how are we doing in this regard? That's the level of accountability that we're going to hold ourselves. Now, are things going to happen that are going to change the schedule? Of course they will. I mean, if this had started pre-COVID, needless to say, we would have had to make some adaptations. But in those circumstances, everybody understands that the circumstances changed and they had to make a change. But in the meantime, what we're introducing is a level of accountability that we have not done prior to that within the church. Remember, I told you that in your business world, or in the business worlds with which you are familiar, if you never were in the business world yourself, this is how behavior is tracked, and this is how behavior is driven. And we do that in our personal lives to some extent, while we manage the time we spend with our kids or our grandkids, or the time we're getting our continuing education, or whatever our other requirements are. But we fail to do that in church world. And then we wake up a month, a quarter, a year later and go, gosh, why didn't we achieve any of our goals? Why didn't we achieve any of our objectives? Because we did not apply the exact same discipline that best in class organizations and people provide in their daily lives and their organizational lives. So this is the rigor of a system like this. Now, here's the good news. The first time you do it, it's fairly hard. You got to get used to it. The second time you do it, it's a lot easier. By the third time you do it, it's a piece of cake. It's habitual. You actually know how to drive the behavior in everything you do. So part of this is building muscle. It's just like the first time you drove a car, or for some of you, the first time you drank a beer. You probably didn't like it much, right? You probably didn't drive very well the first time. But over time, by practicing this level of discipline, then you get better at it. What else is like that? Well, a lot of people would say prayer is like that. Like the first time you prayed, maybe it wasn't the most, effective way that you are praying right now. And so part of what we're trying to do is to show to everybody that the work we're doing is holy work. It's important work. It's critical work. It's life-changing work. It's life-affirming work. It's the kind of work that will make a difference, not only for us and for our communities and for our diocese and for our parish, but so that we too may have a good account before the awesome judgment seat of Christ. So this is kind of a quick walkthrough of what it looks like. I kind of give you a few pieces out there, and the Simon Sinek, who gave us the Start With Why concept, I think said something very powerful when he said that words can inspire, but only action creates change. And if you think about it, and I'm not making a political statement here, think about how many politicians promised something but never delivered. Think about those politicians that delivered whether they promised or not. Think about it in your own lives, the people that you trust and rely on, the people that you count on. And it doesn't matter whether it's a vendor who cuts your grass or blows your snow, or whether it's someone that you work with. A lot of people can talk it, but it's only those that walk it that you're willing to work with, and you're willing to say, these are the people I value. And frankly, from your own perspective, it's only when you achieve that which you set out to accomplish that you feel that sense of accomplishment and purposefulness that comes from it. And then one of my ancestors, or at least I wish he were, Aristotle, he once said that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So part of why this feels very uncomfortable for some of you probably, and maybe foreign for some of you probably, it's because we're not in the habit of demanding that same level of excellence to our church commitment that we demand in our life commitments, that we demand in our business commitments, that you demand in the people that are your vendors and your suppliers. I mean, if Amazon says they're going to deliver it in a day and they say, oh, we'll get it to you whenever we get it to you, you may not buy from them anymore. And we're teaching our faithful that if the work we're doing is the most holy work, the most powerful work, the most important work in your life, then let's start acting like it is. And let's start holding ourselves accountable to that level of granularity in that regard. Okay, so some of you are sitting here like this little guy going, okay, what's next? Because this can get interesting. So let's switch over to that. And here's what I wanted to kind of share with you, just a little bit more of information. When we start to think about these strategic goals or these SMART goals, I want to make sure that you understand that even this process was not just invented by the Franklin Covey organization and was not taught in the 4 Disciplines of Execution first or taught by Bill Marianis or some business school. They're biblical in foundation. Look at Matthew 10:1 and verses 5 through 8. What did Christ tell them to do? He gave them a step-by-step action plan. Go here, do this, do that, do that, do this, do that, and here's the way I want you to do that. I mean, they literally the apostles could have checked the box with them. And all they had to do is put a timeline on it, and they would have had the scoreboard associated with it. So our Lord was very clear when he needed to be to instill in them the level of discipline and the level of what he wanted them to accomplish as they did the Great Commission that he gave them to do. When we start to look at it, these goals are nothing but, this whole process is nothing but a roadmap of how we're going to achieve the vision and achieve our goals. It really is all about keeping us going in the right direction. Remember that story from Alice in Wonderland where she said, which road do I take, and didn't know where she was going and it didn't matter. We now are going to have a destination, and we're going to have a detailed roadmap that tells us exactly how we're going to get that. Now, some of you who have been in processes like this are familiar with the acronym of SMART goals, right? And SMART goals is like everything else. It's an acronym, and it stands for specific. Is the goal clear enough and specific enough so that everyone will understand it? And that's why if you go back and look at the goal that I gave you from the Diocese of New England and compare it to the SMART goal criterion, you will see it meets all the SMART goal criterion. Similarly, when you actually draft the wording of your clergy development goal and your laity engagement stewardship goal and education goal, it's also going to meet these SMART goal criteria. It will be specific enough and clear enough so that everyone understands what it means. Second, it will be measurable. There will be some element that we can actually measure our performance against. Number 3, it will be attainable. Setting a goal that is unrealistic does nothing more than to cause people to just be disappointed and lose faith when they don't achieve it. So if somebody sets too aggressive a goal, that's not particularly helpful. If they set too unaggressive a goal, something that's too easy to accomplish, then that's not motivational. So we need to strike that balance, but it actually has to be attainable. It's got to be in bucket 1 or bucket 2. Number 3, is it relevant to what we want to accomplish, and is it realistically written? When we look at it and say, is achieving this goal going to be relevant and allowing us to achieve the why that we set out, the mission of what we do, and our core values? And then finally, is there a timeline? Is there a realistic timeline that would allow us to achieve this goal with complete accountability? And so this is what the SMART goal criterion looks like, and this is the level of discipline that we want to bring associated to the work of our church. Either you believe that the work of the church is the most important work you will do, or you do not. And if it is the most important work you do, then you should give it the best you have to do. It's kind of the C.S. Lewis quote, where, you know, he said, Christianity, if true, is of utmost importance. If not true, is of no importance. The only thing it can't be is moderately important. And we're asking ourselves, I'm asking you, you're going to be asking those that join you on this journey to commit to making the work of your diocese, the work of your holy OCA church as a whole, including your parish, your diocese, and your national church, to be some of the most important work you do. So the action plan that I showed you is the answer to question number 4, where the rubber meets the road. And again, we said for each step, you're going to identify the specific action, who must do it, the deadline for its completion, and how you will know when it's done. And to kind of put perspective on it, if you've read Sun Tzu in The Art of War, he said something I thought that was very profound. He said, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. And tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. You have to have both strategy and tactics. If I have a strategy about where I want to go, but I have no tactics, I may eventually get there, but it's going to be long and accidental. If I know a bunch of things to do, but I don't know why I'm doing it or where I'm going, then I'm not going to achieve it. So what we're trying to balance here is a strategy that drove us in the direction of these two things that we really need to focus on, basically our clergy development and our laity development. And now we're building the tactics, the exact tactics of how we're going to achieve that. So I walked through that action plan. What I will tell you is that if you go back to my website that's there, again, under the strategic planning tab, the one basically right above yours is the Diocese of New England. You can download their entire strategic plan, all 3 of their WIGs, all 3 of their lead measures, lag measures, and SMART goals, and the action plans to achieve it. And then yours is right below it. And as we finish product, it's going to go up there so that you can always do it. But I encourage you to actually watch through. And in fact, what we did there, just as we did here, Philip wasn't there to help us, but Father Stephen Hosking was, and he recorded all the sessions. So the videos of their sessions of working through and making the sausage is also available in case you want to see what they did. But we're going to go through it together. All right, so quickly, what's next? Well, as I warned you in advance, the next thing I'm going to ask you to do before you are dismissed is to pick the WIG team that you want to work on. To pick the WIG team that you want to work on. And what are those WIG teams going to do? Well, first of all, y'all going to pick some chairs to kind of help manage the process. And anybody that wants to volunteer to chair one of these WIG teams, just shoot me an email at bill@stewardshipcalling.com. What are those WIG teams going to do? And I will be there to facilitate the process with you and guide you through the process and help you through it. So don't worry about having to memorize this thing and going out on your own. I will guide you through this process. You're going to do the work, but I'm just going to guide you through and answer your questions. You're going to finalize the exact wording of those 2 goals. What's the X, the starting point for clergy development and for laity development? What's the Y, the end point you want to achieve? And what's the reasonable time lane that you're going to need to achieve that which you set out to accomplish? Then you're going to identify what are the lag measures, the things we're going to measure at the end, and the lead measures that are both predictable, associated with it, and influenceable so that we can achieve those lag measures. What's the scoreboard that we can use to keep track of our performance, and then the step-by-step action plan to achieve that. Each of your 2 groups are going to work separately from each other to develop for your 2 goals everything you saw that was developed for the DNE's leadership goal. And then at a time that is Eminence picks, we're all going to come back together. The next one will be very short because each of you will know half of the story. You're going to get to hear the other half of the story. So each of the 2 WIG teams will present their final WIG wording, lead measures, lag measures, scoreboard, and action plan. And we do that for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is because you may have feedback or questions that you want to ask them that may lead to an improvement in something they came up with. In other words, we encourage every one of you to be engaged in the process on both sides, even though you were intimately involved with one. And the second reason why it's important for you to listen to that, and again, that whole thing can be done in, usually it's about an hour and a half. It's not a very long session that we need to have, is because guess what's going to happen next? The planning phase is done. You as strategic planners are thanked for your service, given your gold medals and your gold watches, and we shift over to the implementation phase where we recruit the team that's going to actually do all of those steps that you outlined that needed to be done. Now, we hope that you will join the implementation team, but we don't presume that all of you will. We also don't presume that you may work on the one that you help develop. It's entirely possible that you work to develop one of them, but when you see what the other team is doing, you'd be more inclined to want to work on that one. That's totally fine. And we're going to recruit others from throughout the diocese to join us. This is part of building the army that His Eminence needs to do this holy and sacred work. And so there's a recruitment process that happens where we recruit more people from the diocese because there's going to be skill sets that we need that you have in your diocese. So for example, if one of the steps is, let's teach all of our clergy the banjo, well, we know that we have to recruit a banjo playing clergyman, right? Just so happens we know one. So you're going to find that as you start to look at the steps that need to be done, you're going to think about the team you have in your incredible diocese that you may not be utilizing and frankly may have never worked on a diocese level activity. Now think of what we're doing here. We're starting to create a growing army of faithful willing to work on diocese level activities and diocese level ministries. And after we finish these goals, by the grace of God, we're going to add more to it, and we're going to add more people to the team. Yes, Your Eminence? You need to unmute. You need to unmute. Your Eminence, you need to unmute. There we go.
At one level, I'm already doing this. I've got 2 work groups right now working on liturgical music and multicultural ministry. My goal is we have a group in mission. My goal is to want to now add education, but I don't know where this fits into all that. I still want to continue that work.
Of course. Of course.
I'm not quite sure if what I'm doing fits into this paradigm. I mean, we're talking similar concepts, like with the people in liturgical music. What I want them to work on is develop action plans about what do they want to accomplish and what goals do they set. I want them to be able to put a price tag on this. And the way I've been thinking is that if I'm going to go to a diocesan council and say we need a development director, I need to have some things specifically laid out saying this is what we want to accomplish with liturgical music in the next 3 years. This is what it's going to cost. I want to do that in missions. I want to do that, with clergy development. And once we can put a price tag on it, then I can say, we need a development director to help us raise these funds. But I feel like for me to go to the council with concepts that haven't been fleshed out, why would we want to fund concepts unless they haven't been fleshed out? And I guess I'm thinking the same way, but I don't know if I'd move. I don't know. So,
well, let me answer the first question you asked and make a suggestion for the second question you were getting to. So the first question you asked is, absolutely, you're going to keep doing all those things. Remember what I said, that this is focusing disproportionate energy on a few items while we keep 80% of our energy on doing all the things that need to happen. Now, part of this is, forget you for a second because you're kind of at the top of the heap having to manage all of these work streams. But imagine that you have a group of people, just like you have separate groups working on the issues that you have working on, which is brilliant, which is wonderful, which is fantastic. And they need to keep going, and they need to keep working, and they need to keep developing what they're doing, right? You're now going to have 2 dedicated work teams that are providing disproportionate energy on these 2 areas. How are we going to maximize engagement of our laity? And how are we going to improve the development of our clergy at the same time that all these other wonderful things are going on? Here's one difference. What you saw, I think, here that probably blew your mind a little bit and probably made your head explode a little bit if you're normal, is a very comprehensive, detailed action plan that probably does not exist with some of the other groups that you're leading. And so maybe, just maybe, some of the skill sets that are being developed on this side of the house can also be imported to that side of the house and some of that same level of accountability. But if you go back to the action plans on this one, Your Eminence, you'll see that one of the very first steps that they're looking at is what do we need to build and how do we need to build it? And if there's a cost associated with that, then it's identified right at the beginning. So that feeds to the second thing that you were talking about is, as these plans are rolling out and developing, they're identifying what, if any, third-party costs there are associated with that. So they too will be added into the mix. Now, you may choose to prioritize things differently, and of course, that is your prerogative as both hierarch and the diocesan council. But what this process has led you to, what this, if you will accept this, and maybe at the end of the day when you think about it you will, and maybe you won't, but if you will accept this, what this has led you to is a process that says, as we reflect on why we exist, as we reflect on what we do, as we reflect on what our values are, and as we reflect on what our world looks like, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, there are two things that if we can do much better than we're doing now, will change a lot of other things for the positive in our diocese and our parishes. And that's what the effort of providing disproportionate energy on this is, while at the same time continuing the 80% of energy on those other goals. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of.
What's left unanswered?
Well, in terms of me trying to use the fact that this is a detailed plan,
Uh-huh.
how much I can incorporate that into these other groups.
Oh, that's easy. Okay, I'm sorry. I misunderstood your question. So this conversation you and I can have offline.
Yeah.
If you want, I would be happy to. We wouldn't go through anywhere near the same process here because they are already very focused. They're already very formed. They're already far along in some respects and stuff like that. We could talk a little bit about how some of the plan development work they could incorporate in the way they're executing against their plan. And if they find it helpful, then they can do it. And if they don't find it helpful, then they shouldn't do it. Yeah. But I'm happy to help them do that because what we have found, Your Eminence, in other parishes and dioceses that are further along is that while we form these strategic planning teams around very discrete tasks and the other activities of the parish or the diocese continued, what over time the other programs realized was the discipline and the process that was being used on the other side of the house would help them on their side of the house. And so we shared it and they grew together as a result of that. And it actually transformed. One simple example, there was a parish that I was working with that was building a new sanctuary and a new hall. And I said, gee, I wish you'd wait until you finish your strategic plan because I think that's going to inform what you build. It's, oh, no, we're downstream. We're going to do that. Okay, great. So we finished the strategic plan and they identified the key most important areas. And guess what happened? The building committee said, wait, we're going to stop the design and construction because we think there's some things we were going to want to change now because of what we've learned from this process. And they worked together and they made some adjustments, and the benefits that were gained on the strategic planning side of the house actually benefited the rest of the house. And then what's also benefited is once they learned the discipline of providing some level of accountability, everybody's game got better. Everybody started asking the right questions. And you'll start to see transformation happen. Remember, I told you that one of the things you get when you do a good strategic plan is a change of culture. You get a change of culture in the diocese because now people look at it and say, I've got to figure out what is it that I want to accomplish? How am I going to measure that? What's realistic and what's a realistic timeline? As opposed to just some generic, oh, let's just come together and we figure this out when we figure it out kind of thing. Now, it won't happen overnight. It won't happen for everybody, and some people will never get there. There's always that, remember the 16% that are the laggards, and that's fine. I mean, we love them. We're grateful for their whatever they're willing to do and whatnot. But let's start by proving the viability of this in these two most critical areas. And in the meantime, we can also help the other areas learn to perhaps improve what they're doing, if that's what you want. Does that sound reasonable?
I think so.
Okay. You need to think about it. Of course you do. So this is what's going to happen in the small group gatherings that we're going to organize after this around everybody's schedule. So here's what's next. It's time to pick team 1. And again, no order of priority, folks, so don't get hung up on the number. I could call them, X and Y if you want to, right? Team 1 is clergy development. Team 2 is laity engagement, stewardship, and education. You got to pick one. So we're going to go through the listing here, and you're going to pick which one it is, and we're going to fill in the blank. And then we're going to and then we're going to see whether we're balanced or we're out of balanced, and then we may need to ask some people to make a move here. Okay, so this will take a very short period of time. It's an alphabetical order by last name, so you all know your last name, so that I don't have to call you. Why don't you just start out? Father Andrew, you're up. Which one or two? Okay, Marianne, which one or two? You have to unmute. Everybody unmute.
One.
One, okay. Unmute and tell me.
Bartek held up a 1.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Okay. All right. Next. Father Andrew
One.
Clements.
Number 1.
Gotcha. Father James.
Number 1.
Okay, we're going to see some moves here. Ellen.
Number 2.
Okay. Robert.
Number 2.
Kenneth.
2.
Father Herman. Robert.
2.
Okay. Not 3. Okay. Okay.
2.
1.
I don't think he's here, right?
He's here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. I'm
not
trying
part
to
of
make.
it.
No, he's not here.
Okay, I think so. Okay, good. Is Simeon back with us? I can't see. I've all screens.
1.
Oops.
1. Not here.
Not here? Okay.
Out of here.
Carrie's here.
2.
Father Timothy.
1.
Philip.
1.
Father Benjamin. All right. Father Jacob. Is he with us? I can't.
2 is fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. Father Joel.
2.
Dos Equis. There we go. All right. Father
Dos.
Paul. Father Paul.
Out of here.
Not here. Okay. And Father John.
Put me where you want me.
There we
Get
go.
out. There you
I
go.
love this. Yeah,
Bill?
there's a team player.
Bill, 2 things.
Yeah.
Proto-Deacon George is here. I think
2, please.
type up there.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Can you try again, Father George?
2, please.
Yeah, I got him now.
And then maybe in place of Father Jonathan Leakin, you can put Father Paul Janakos.
All right. Well, we're going to fill this out later.
Father
Spell it.
Paul Lincoln. Father Paul Lincoln. You can't spell Greek? What's the matter with you?
No, what I'm trying to do is avoid typing here. Okay.
I think Father. Oh, he's still with us.
Yeah, it's here somewhere, isn't he? 1 or 2.
1.
Okay. All right. Who are we missing here? Father Benjamin.
He didn't join us.
Okay. Was he not on?
No.
He was on. This is where he's needed.
Okay. Okay. All right. And then, all right. So we have on 1, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. On 2, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is this a beautiful thing or what? This is a beautiful thing.
I'll take 1 then since it's tied. That'll be fine.
All right. So
That's
that
not
makes
bad.
Father Paul's going to be a 2, right?
He is a 2. That's good.
We're voting for everybody right now. Okay. That's a beautiful thing. Okay.
Might just sit in on both of these and just watch, or what?
You are the ultimate free agent. You get to come in, come out, choose, throw hand grenades, do whatever you want to. You are free of the heavy lift, Your Eminence, but we invite you to every one of those any way you want to. It's all love, but we want to make sure that you have every opportunity to participate, but without the obligation. Father Paul, what's your email address, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, sure. Hold on just a second. I have to unmute.
Are we gonna give Father Tucci a number?
Yeah, is he still in?
He's not here, but he was here.
I know. Okay.
So
Simeon said his number, I thought, wherever he wants, yeah.
PJANNAKOS@gmail.com.
Say again, please.
Just P and my last name
Oh, okay. All right.
@gmail.com.
All right. Good. And you've got that, obviously, Philip, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And where do we decide, Father Benjamin? Somebody make the judgment about which one he would be better served.
Two.
Two.
There we go. Okay. Well, thank you all. The only challenge here is we don't have as many laity on team one as possible. So I'll manage that process. What's going to happen next is everyone's going to take, the rest of this week off. So don't worry about it. Philip and I are going to work behind the scenes he already has got one of the videos completed. The other videos will be completed eventually in the fullness of time. He's going to send me the links. They'll all be up on the website so you can go back and look at it and refresh your memory. And if you need to, explain to your spouse that actually you were working on church work this entire time, you can prove it to them. Exactly. And then what's going to happen is Philip and I are going to coordinate, if that's okay, Philip, and we're going to send each of the teams an email with some choices of times to get together for probably 2 Zooms, no longer than 2 hours each, but probably shooting for 1.5 hours each. I will do some advanced work for you, just as I did today, and have it available to you to kind of make it easier for you. And then you're going to tweak and mark and change and do whatever you want to do in that regard. Okay. So that's kind of what's happening next. But let me just kind of let me end with, I know we're running a little bit long here, but let me just end with, well, actually we're not quite long yet, but I'm trying to keep us on track ahead of schedule. Let me kind of show you where you ended up. This is what you did today. And I want you to reflect on this and see the level of accomplishment that you all achieved in one day that, quite frankly, everybody said was not going to be possible to get done in one day, because normally this is a multi-day process. And while it wasn't ideal and it wasn't perfect, I appreciate y'all's patience and guidance. What you said is, if you're looking for a place where you can be transformed in Christ's joy, peace, and sacrificial love, boy, do you have a diocese for them. If you're looking for a place where people may become one with God and others, boy, do you have a diocese for them. You can start to see how that messaging is so fundamentally different from the other way you do things, right? Next, what you said was that when we look at our strengths, we have some good diocese leadership and hierarchy. We have some financial solvency. Orthodoxy, of course, is a strength. The use of our language and not dependent on ethnicity and our diocese size and quality is a good strength. At the same time, we're concerned about our lack of engagement in ministries, our stewardship and fundraising, the support and development of our clergy, our diocese resources and size, our overall resistance and reluctance to change, and the lack of a strategic plan, which you can now check that one off the box. And then on our opportunities, we said there's a lot of seekers out there available to this, and we have technology and communications that we're probably not deployed as fully as possible. And we always got to be mindful of the fact that there's COVID and other crises that can interfere with us. There's certainly political divisiveness and secularism and hostility to church Christianity and cultural antagonisms. Nevertheless, we remain committed to a set of values which focus on being Christ-centered, welcoming, and loving, being generous stewards, reaching out and evangelizing. Everything we do with integrity, transparency, and accountability, and we remain faithful to the Orthodox and liturgical tradition, because our mission is to unite the faithful of the Diocese of the Midwest to discover a Christ-centered life, welcoming all to worship in the Orthodox Christian faith. And the way we're going to achieve that is by providing disproportionate effort and focus on clergy development, lay engagement, stewardship, and education. Ladies and gentlemen, I just gave you in about 1 minute what you took a whole day to do, but which you can then describe to everybody who's been involved in this process is the journey that you've begun as a diocese today. Are there any questions?
No questions, Bill, but I just my observation. First of all, thank you. It's a well-structured approach to this, and that's been part of our problem for years, is a lot of good ideas have always come up between different diocesan councils and what have you. But the metrics of this system, the way that you've gone through the process, is something we need. The scoreboard, if you will, is something that we've needed. But my other observation is that if we stay faithful to this approach, it's something that periodically needs to continue to happen ongoing. It doesn't end with this process, just completing this process. It's something that has to continue to go on, always like sharpening the knife, trying to keep it up as to the best of our ability. That's my observation.
Well, John, I could not agree with you more, and I thank you for saying that. It's just like if you're going to be working out, you don't just work out for 1 year and say, okay, now I'm done for the rest of my life. You're creating a discipline that allows you to go forward. And when you do this, and as I said, every time you do the next one is easier, and then the one after that is even easier. But to do this and to do this well requires a level of discipline, but it requires exactly what you said, that you got to go to the next one, the next one, the next one. Because guess what? In a year or two from now, when you've completed your clergy development goal and you've completed your laity engagement, stewardship, and education goal, and you now prioritize and say, what are the two biggest things that are facing us? It's going to be two different things. And you're going to have to attack those two different things, while at the same time you're doing all of those other wonderful things that you're doing. And for organizations that are most successful, this discipline becomes habitual. In my law firm, we did a strategic plan every 3 years. It was like a religious activity for us. As we were finishing the one plan, 2.5 years into it, we began the development of the plan that was going to guide us for the next 3 years. And that's how you get to be a highly successful, highly profitable, highly organized, highly cohesive organization. And that was for a business, for goodness sakes. Imagine how important this is to do for Christ's church. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Okay, well, I apologize for finishing 30 minutes early. I know that is an unpardonable sin in an Orthodox activity to actually finish early, just as unpardonable as it was that we actually began on time for every session. So I mean, I'm not sure I'm dealing with an Orthodox crew, because that's kind of an unusual phenomenon, I think. But I can stick around if anybody has any questions. But again, you don't need to feel the need to do that. We will be in touch with you. All of this, as I said, over the next week, as Philip and I coordinate together, will be uploaded on the website, so you can look at it, you can download it. And then probably next week, we'll reach out to you to start setting up at convenient times the separate sessions for each of those groups. And then as we make progress and we have a sense of what that progress looks like, I'll coordinate with His Eminence as to when we want to get everybody back together again to look at each other's work. You will always be able to see the work in progress by going to the website. So, if you got a few extra moments, bang around in there and you can see, where people are going and what people are doing and what people are working on. With that, I have nothing more, Your Eminence.
Well, I have the most important question right now I need to ask is of Mary Ann and Father John. Is it still snowing?
Yes.
No, well, it's very light right now compared to the 14 inches that are in my driveway right now. So.
Oh, I thought you were in wherever, not here.
Oh, I'm here, believe me. And my
Chardon has 18 inches.
I'm getting close to that. And my snowblower though is in my storage shed, which isn't here at my house. So I've got to go in the morning and try and get that out of there. So they haven't plowed that.
This is none of my business, but I think you ought to reschedule your trip to Cleveland if I were you. But that's your call.
Well, we'll see what happens. If it stops, we'll see what happens overnight, and we wouldn't get there till later in the day. So I don't know. I'll see.
All right.
I'm going to call Father John tomorrow morning at 7 and see what things look like. Why did you get so much snow? What happened?
It's the snow belt. What do you want?
Yeah,
it's
this
Cleveland.
is Ohio.
And it's 2020, so anything's possible.
Plus, I can't. Minneapolis is dry. That would be like God, I can't fathom that. The Minneapolis is dry and warm, and you got the snow. Oh boy.
Yeah, like I said, welcome to 2020
And
Yeah.
the Great Lakes.
and the Great Lakes, right?
18 inches. Jeez, man. Oh,
Yeah, it's too early for that, right?
that is. Yeah.
December 1st, come on.
All right, I'm done. Okay.
All right. Somebody lead us in a closing prayer, and with great gratitude to everybody for your dedicated service and also for giving all of us the opportunity to serve you. It's such a blessing.
It is truly meet to bless you, Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure, and the mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without corruption, you gave birth to God, the Word, true Theotokos. We magnify you. Thank you, Bill, for
Amen.
the hard work
Yes,
you.
He's
Bye-bye.
plenty
Yes, Plenty, that's what
Thank you. Thank you.
Philip,
This is
thank
how
you.
we deal with snow in Cleveland, by the way.